Hello and welcome to the next episode of Sound Design Here Create. This is Project 4, Pine's Fog, Episode 4, Completion. So, quick recap. Sound Design Here Create is a sound design focused series where we undertake a set of projects, each driven by a prompt. A prompt would be a piece of media, in this case an image and a video of a forest, and a piece of text telling us what to do. The text is, here is a forest. Create music inspired by the fog. You may also notice this 2 artists 1 prompt tag. This is referring to a collaboration I'm doing with YouTuber Odo Zendaidokai. Their channel is linked in the description, so please check out everything that they do, but let me explain what we'll be doing. Both of us will be going through our own sound design processes, and based on the outcome of those, we'll be listening to what we've both done. And we will be commenting and learning and highlighting differences and similarities in our approaches, and hopefully coming out of it feeling enriched. So what have I done so far? Well, so far we spent an episode coming up with ideas and making some placeholder sounds using presets in Bitwig. We then took a set of samples and turned those into various sounds to use. We used a couple of synthesizers. That was the Create Audio Westpest and Arturia's Pigments synthesizer. And all of those sounds have now been brought together. Let's take a look at the video just to remind us what's going on. And in fact, let me play the audio roughly synchronized with it. So that main rising pad, I'm going to start now. That's Pigments. The ARP is the Create Audio. We have a sound in the high register, which is some samples of leaves that I used. We have a sound in the low register, which is some samples of me walking through grass. And then 2 other sounds, one supposed to reflect the movement of the person recording the scene, their feet in wood chip, that's me walking through wood chips in the undergrowth for the scene, and also breath, which is me breathing. So I can already hear things are a little imbalanced and maybe the right elements are not coming through. There's also a little bit of competition for spectral space, so I can already hear a number of things that I'd like to do. So no synthesizer today, I'm just going to be working in Bitwig. I guess I could have got the push out, but I happen to have this out from the last video. So let's look at Bitwig. Since last time, let me have a quick scan through. Did I do anything? Yes. So one thing that I did was the sample of the arpeggio from the Westpest wasn't time synchronized properly. So I ended up squashing it a little bit, making it a little bit shorter, and sliding the audio a little bit just to have it on beat. So now it's operating in beat. I also mentioned when I was recording it that I hadn't tuned it specifically, and indeed it was out of pitch slightly. I didn't use a tuner to correct it, I just did it by ear, so this may still be imperfect, but I think maybe that imperfection is appealing to some extent at least. And finally, Pigments. I mentioned that Pigments is for Windows and that I ran it in Wine. I've got it currently hosted under Yarbridge, I guess that's how it's supposed to be pronounced. So it's directly embedded here, but I'm not really going to be doing any sound design with that. My original plan was just to print it to audio, but I think this works reasonably well. So let's listen to the parts individually. Note that normally when mixing, I wouldn't listen to all the parts together, but I already have a few thoughts listening through it the first time. So let's listen to the footsteps. So the first thing I thought here is this is a little bit too high-pitched, so I'm going to use a pitch shifter. So I guess you can hear this is down almost an octave. I adjust the grain size just so the texture sounds right, and I adjusted the filter down a little bit just to pick up a little bit more of the bass. If you remember, I was saying that I'd like things at higher altitude to be higher pitched, things at lower altitude to be lower pitched. So this is a low element, so I want it to be fairly low pitched. The moss and the ground is actually below this, so that can be even lower. Let's move on to this breath sound. First thought is it's a little bit too low pitched. So I'm gonna, again, use a pitch shifter. I'm probably gonna have to turn this down a bit, but I think I'm happier with the tone. I was a little bit unhappy with where that was sitting in the mix, so let's jump over to this pad sound. So I think that sounds okay. I think it has a tonality that I'm okay with. I might experiment with the grain settings a little bit. One thing I'm interested in here is maybe the possibility of moving it up a register, so let's see how that sounds. Definitely has more texture. Now I'm probably gonna sweep the filter down, maybe pull it down a whole octave. Unfortunately, you probably hear a little bit of popping going on. I think that's pigments. Pigments is relatively CPU intensive, and when I'm actually recording the screen as well as doing everything else that's going on, it's overloading the CPU periodically. I'm going to experiment. I'm using a low pass filter. I think I like this. So let's. I'm gonna have to go through, I think, and add probably a common reverb across all of these things. So maybe I'll add that now. So I'm going to add effects track, and into that I'm going to go for a convolution reverb, and let's have a look at the reverbs that we have here. I have no idea what this sounds like, but more Mornack church sounds interesting. So let's see what happens if I send a whole load of this footstep to that. I like the sound of that. So let's turn this level down to something that makes more sense. So now it's just got a little space around it. That's at minus 22 dB. So probably a little bit less of this. Minus 30 dB. Let's listen to this mouse pad. Another thing that I probably didn't mention that I did off camera was I decreased the amount of stereo spread in the layers of this pad just to keep it centered in the bass a bit more. I feel like you don't get that much benefit from this being sent to the reverb, so I'm just going to keep it out of there. Let's listen to these leaves. I like how this sounds. Let's see what happens if I... This already has some of its own reverb, so I'm not going to send too much of it there. So this will definitely need reverb, but I'm thinking already that it could do with a delay. So let's grab ourselves a delay. Maybe a bit slower than that. I like the rhythm that that gives us. This will soften the tone of the reverbs. I'm going to open the filter. This is like a high pass and a low pass, so as the reverbed part gets narrower, so if I have it completely wet, so you hear there's very little bass in the delayed sound. Sounds good. I also quite like the possibility that we might bring the mix up. So that's the first automation that I've thought of here. I may go through and add some other automations, but I definitely like that concept. So let's do that now. So we have the mix level. So this is where it starts, and let's set where it ends to be what? Just over 50% is where I think it sounded right. Let's skip in. So now we have this evolution of the delay sound. Makes sense, I think. Let's listen to Pigments here. So I think for Pigments, probably the most important thing to automate here is going to be this macro control that I added. Let's turn it up high and let's listen. So it gets a little louder as we turn this down, but the timbre changes. So what I'll probably do is I'll start with the macro level high, and then I'll have it fading down to 0, letting this fog become maybe clearer, more well-defined. So I want it to start at about 75%, and I want it to end at 0. So now we have an animation of this sound from Pigments. Even though the sound in Pigments, I gave it its own delay and reverb, I would like to bring it into the same space as the rest of them. So now I think we have a basic setup here. We have most of the sounds that we might like. Now we need to figure out, actually, this probably could do with some reverb on this. Just to bring it into the same space as I've been saying. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to sidechain the pigment sound. It's going to be ducking when the tree sound comes in. I want this to be fairly subtle. So let's add a dynamics processor and let's connect it to the trees. So I'm going to run it from the pre-fader, which means it's not going to be affected by this level and it's not going to be affected by the effects. So let's set a really high ratio and just let's figure out where the threshold needs to be. I think a soft knee is going to work well for this. So you hear that rhythmic aspect that's happening there. The ratio is way too strong there. And I'm going to tweak the attack and the release. So the attack's a bit softer, release. So I think that works. So this blue mark here is indicating when it's ducking. So now what I'd like to do is try and adjust the relative volume levels. And the way that I think I'm going to do that is I'm just going to turn all of these things down to start with. So let's turn everything down to 0. And then I'm going to think about the parts that I need to bring in and which parts are going to be important. And then I'm going to try and set everything else around that. So I think the thing which we care most about, it's not called pigments, let's call it fog. Let's bring this in. I need this to be audible. The next musical element is the trees. So I need them to be audible, but the ducking should help with the audibility. Next, probably the bass element, this moss pad. Now in the high end, we have this leaf sound. So I've left that quite far back. I should have probably left this one up at, let's see, I can set it to 0 dB. And now I'm going to use the volumes on this footstep sound. And the breathing sound. So the leaves sound, I've pulled it down a bit, but I've sent more of it to the reverb. So I think that's the main kind of bulk of this sound working. Now what I'm going to do is add some simple motion just to try and like fade these parts in and out as necessary. So I think this breath, I like it coming right in because I feel like the person who is filming this is going to be present throughout. Maybe I'll let the footsteps fade out a little bit and the breath fade out just a little bit at the end. I think this sound, the sound reflecting the trees, I might have it fading out all the way from when the last of these notes comes in. And I'll have them fading in to when the first of the chords play. So let me just stop this. And let me play it through from the beginning again. So I would like this leaves part to fade in a little bit. This is already on a layer, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a tool to it, and then I'm going to automate the volume of the tool. So the volume can start, or rather 0 is where I want it to reach. So let me set 0 dB, say here, and let's set this lower. I'm going to jump back to the beginning. And I think for the mouse pad, I'm going to do something similar. So I'd like to be able to control the volume. Rather than automating the master volume control, or rather the track volume control, using a tool like this gives me an independent function that I can adjust. So I think this makes more sense. This is going to have to come in sooner. So let's set the 0 dB there. Go back to the beginning, try one more. So the volume on this is working, but I think I'd like to take it even further. And right at the end, I think I'll start this just fading out, mostly just to make sure it really hits 0 at the right point. And similarly, for this leaf channel, we have an automation on the volume. Let's do something similar. Let's just automate that down to 0 here. Anything else that I need to automate? I think I could do with some more motion here. Possibly stereo motion. So this I think is an interesting idea. Let's bring a tool in to use with the on the tree track. And what I would like to do is automate the pan. So I'm going to bring in a random, and these are, I think, happening every second beat. So I'm going to set this to half notes, and I'm going to send this. Let's go for 60%. Let's solo it just to see how it sounds for now. Oh, bipolar. I noticed it was only going to the right side. Yeah, I like that. I think that's much more interesting. So I wonder if there's anything else I can do to automate this leaves sound. It might be interesting to try and adjust the relative volume of these two elements. So this one called polymer is the clean tone, and the one called concrete is the tone that has the real texture. So what I might do is I might start with the cleaner tone and go to the less clean tone. So this is currently at minus 2.8. So let's start at minus 1. Let's have it drop all the way down to, let's go 6 dB below the 2.8. So let's just call that minus 8. So not a very strong automation, but an automation nonetheless. And this concrete, it's starting at minus 9.9. So let's pull it down from there to maybe 6 dB down. So about minus 14, let's say, and let's have it move up all the way to minus 7.6. Let's see how that goes. So I'm going to just play it. I'm going to skip in so we hopefully have a note here. Further. So we have a little bit more motion going on. We have a slight change in the sound. And I think the final thing I'm probably going to do today is add a little automation on this MOS pad. I'm not really sure what parameter I'm going to automate. So let's just have a look. So this resonance is an adjustment, maybe. I'm going to see what the width impact it has. I'm going to set it to maximum. Okay, so the width is quite a subtle parameter, I think, but I'm going to start probably not at 0. I'm going to start at, let's say, 40%, and it's going to automate all the way up to 200. So this is just going to give us a little expansion or spread in the stereo spectrum, not as extreme as the voice panning that I had previously, but that's there. I think maybe this breath could do with just some subtle movement. And I think that subtle movement is maybe going to just be a really small movement over time on the pitch, on the filter cutoff, and maybe a slight movement on the resonance. So what I'll do, I think, is I will move the cutoff higher and the resonance lower. So I've set a value for the resonance there. It was about, yeah, that's probably maybe a little higher than that. Let's say resonance of about 15, and then it's going to drop all the way down to a resonance of 0. And then the filter cutoff is going to end here, and it's going to be lower at the beginning. So where it is presently, that was there, and then I'm going to bring this a little lower for the beginning, not too much. Let's see, it was around 800, so let's bring it down to 600. Yep, so we have a slightly different tone there. And I think I'll do something analogous with the footsteps. So with the breathing, I've got it becoming higher cutoff as we get towards the end. So I'll probably do the counter motion here. So instead of the cutoff going up to the end, the cutoff is going to go down to the end. So in this case, it's going to start. Oops, wrong parameter. It's going to start here. And it's going to end, let's say, 500. So that's dropping, and I'm going to have the resonance going up. So it's going to start around here, and it'll go up a little bit. So these are just small motions that are happening here. think that's probably about all I'm going to do. Let me just have a quick listen. Nothing is glaringly wrong, so rather than take the time to listen to that, I'm going to start the video playing and we'll listen to it while the video plays. I adjusted the balance of the fog sound and the tree sound. Another thing that I did there is the footstep and the breath sound. I moved the fade out a little bit later, so we hear those a little bit more. They become slightly more present at the very end. I think that's sounding roughly like I would like it to sound. So I'll save that. Probably I might make a few small tweaks, but mostly I think this is complete. I think I'm happy with how it's ended up. I'm looking forward to seeing what my collaborator, Odozen Daidakai, did with the same prompt and the same video. We'll be sharing those with one another and we will be releasing our reaction and response and learning videos, which I hope will be informative to you all. In any case, I hope you've been enjoying Sound Design Hit Create. I hope you've been enjoying this project. But most importantly, I'd like to say thank you very much for being with me today and goodbye.